The last surviving police officer tasked with guarding struggle stalwart Abdullah Haron denies any knowledge of political detainees being tortured. Johannes Burger was a young officer in 1969. At the same time, the Muslim cleric was detained at Maitland police station. The second week of renewed hearings into the death of the political activist Imam Abdullah Haron is currently underway in the Western Cape High Court. We're now joined by Newzroom Afrika's Natalie Malgas for an update in terms of what you have been hearing coming out of that court. Good afternoon, Natalie.
Well, Duru, just before we adjourned for lunch, we heard from the last surviving police officer who started his career at Maitland, and he basically detailed the fact that he had seen and interacted with the Imam as a political detainee at Maitland police station for about 14 days. On the day of his passing in September 1969, he says he remembers the Imam being slow and sluggish and making quite a point to rub part of his torso, which he later discovered was in fact bruised when the officer Johannes Burger saw a clearer version of those post-mortems and the diagrams of the exact injuries on the Imam's body. He says he only later realized that in fact the Imam was tortured. He had said, in fact, the last notes he made before this court adjourned was that he actually, despite being a career police officer and having worked in the service for his entire career before he retired in 1997, he had no knowledge of the kind of torture and stringent interrogation that particularly political detainees endured in the police service, and that at the hands of senior police officers attached to the kind of security branch, the apartheid security branch. He spoke of this being, Officer Burger spoke of his interactions with the Imam, how they chatted on a regular basis, and spoke about their families, spoke a little about sport, particularly rugby, and he found the Imam to be quite a chatty guy. He didn't really go into details of the personality of the Imam, but he at one point broke down in the stand, recounting how emotional it was to learn of the torture that the Imam endured and how he actually passed away.
To the late Imam's son yesterday. Just remind our viewers what he had to tell you, especially in relation to this process for the family.
The family has said that this has been a long time coming. This was something that they really wanted to see happen, to correct history in a way. They had always believed that there was something more to their father's passing about 53 years ago. They were always suspicious of the accounts of the apartheid police that their father tripped and fell, and that is how he died. They had always believed that there was an extra hand to it and that there was elements of torture, even though all of the interactions that they had with their father when relatives dropped off food every evening, home-cooked meals to the Imam in his police cells, he always said he was fine and he was okay, but his family knew that there was definitely something seedy happening in the shadows. And this was a process that they wanted to correct history and to ultimately get the facts on the table of what really happened. This review of the inquest, we've heard from independent pathologists, we've heard from an aeronautical engineer that spoke to the fact that the injuries the Imam sustained are not conducive with those who did fall down a flight of stairs. We heard from the aeronautical engineer that given the readings and the data from the height of the flight of stairs, that would have attributed to a certain kind of injuries that the Imam did not sustain. So the family is feeling from the testimonies they've heard so far a little bit of vindication, because they had always held out hope that justice would prevail, that their family, including their mother, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, would be able to hear the truth as to what happened to the Muslim cleric back in 1969.
Natalie Malgas, thank you very much for that update.